Would you ask Mr. Stokes to come back in, please? All right, Mr. Stokes, are you ready to carry on?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Stokes, can I ask you please to be shown CST 403061? Yes, this is a letter you wrote to Janice Ray of the TMO, dated the 27th of September 2010, as you can see. And in the first paragraph it says, after our meeting on Friday 24th September 2010 at the Hub, 300 Kensal Road, North Kensington, I would like to put in writing the management procedures, topics and issues, etc. we discussed, so that when completing any fire risk assessments for residential buildings under the control of the Tenants Management Organisation, TMO, of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea in future, these standards and observations will apply. And then you go on to set out some details which we're going to return to. Just pausing there for a moment, it looks as if you had a meeting with Janice Ray on the 24th of September 2010.
Correct.
Yes. And that was it not, the day after she had written to you with a letter of intent confirming that you were the successful tenderer? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And that was about 3 weeks or so before you were officially due to start your contract, which was, I think, on the 18th of October, as you remember it.
Okay.
Yes. Did you set up that meeting, or was that meeting set up before you were made aware that you had been the successful tenderer?
I've got no idea. I wouldn't have thought so.
No. And can you help us with why you were attending a meeting with her before your contract officially commenced?
To put it, if I'd have been told to put in place the criteria for any of these items.
Right. When you say, I'd like to put in writing the management procedures, etc., we discussed, did you intend to add that information to your fire risk assessments and then use that information in your subsequent fire risk assessments?
That's what it looks like here, yes.
Right. Why were you meeting her in September 2010 when you'd already met her a few months earlier in June, 22nd of June 2010, as we've seen from the earlier correspondence? Do you know?
No idea.
Right. Now, after the meetings with Janice Ray on the 22nd of June and 24th September 2010, did you ever meet her again, specifically to discuss information to go into your FRAs?
Yes. Oh, you mean, did I meet her after this date?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you meet her frequently? Did you meet her annually, for example?
I would say three times a year, 4 times a year,
Right.
something like that.
And did you specifically meet her in order to discuss the information to go in to the sections of the FRA which you can see set out on page 1 of this letter? For example, employee fire training, fire and emergency information for residents.
If my memory is correct, her agenda would be provided beforehand. She would say, this is what we want to discuss. Have you got anything you want to add to the agenda? Then we'd have the meeting.
I follow. Now, can I ask you then about how you would go about undertaking a fire risk assessment? Can we start with the competence standard in PAS 79 2012 at CTA 703, page 65? This is Appendix A to PAS 79, and it's entitled The Assessment of Risk from Fire. And it starts, the first paragraph, it is innate to the process of carrying out a fire risk assessment that there be an assessment of fire risk. The competent fire risk assessor must be able to make a subjective judgment, albeit based largely on objective evidence, of the overall risk to life from fire in the building for which a fire risk assessment is carried out. Now, I want to focus your mind on the words, albeit based largely on objective evidence. Would you agree that the approach set out here was the approach that you would have sought or did seek to adopt?
Yes.
Now, if we go to your statement, we'll come back to this, but if we can go to your witness statement, your first statement at page 17, paragraph 51, please. You say this. Initially, in the November of each calendar year, the KCTMO would send me a list of properties to inspect in the next calendar year. The higher the risk category of a particular building, the more frequently it would be assessed. Following receipt of the list, I would then carry out FRAs on the identified buildings throughout the following year, liaising with Miss Ray with regards to the practicalities of so doing, arranging access to the building, provision of relevant documents, etc. See further, para 67 below. So it's right, is it, that Janice Ray would send you a list of FRAs or buildings for which to complete an FRA?
Yes.
And how would you schedule the FRAs to be carried out?
From memory, they would usually come by month, so I would know how many to do each month, and that would be from the previous FRA. So they were at 3 and 5 year intervals. If they were undertaken in the June, they would be undertaken in the June of the year that was allocated.
And how would you decide the order in which each building should be assessed?
If it, as a group together, I would try and do it geographically, because it was less travelling around.
Right. So did she send you a list saying in November you've got to do these buildings, in December these buildings, January, etc.? Yes.
For so many months in advance, yes.
Yes. And how many months in advance, on average?
It depended. It was always flexible, because if work was to be undertaken in a building or a question was asked, this would always be added to the list, or even sometimes some would drop out of the list.
Right. So can we take it then, in summary, that the basis on which you prioritised your inspections was the list provided to you by Janice Ray, and then within that list you would decide on priorities based on geography?
Yes.
Right. Information gathering. When she instructed you to carry out an FRA of a particular building, what information would she normally give you about that building?
Most of the times now, I'd been around most of the buildings myself, so I would have a general idea of the building. I would then ask for any updates of dry riser testing, any other services in the building, which I would be provided to me, plus the in-house FRA that was undertaken since my last visit.
And if there'd been no previous FRA or none available, what would she give you?
I'd go from the start, so it'd be initial building look at. I would ask what's in the building. The list you showed me at the beginning has a list of all the assets within that building, so I would know before I went whether it had a dry riser, height of the building, etc., etc.
Now, can we go to your first witness statement on the next page, please, page 18, and look at paragraph 55, Roman 1. And there you say, the general approach I took to carrying out an FRA was as follows. 1, I would receive certain information from the client as to the nature of the common parts being assessed, as well as certain information on the active and passive fire safety measures in place. And how would that information come to you? Would it be by email or?
Email.
What? And is the information that you identify there in general terms, more specifically what you've just identified to me?
Yes.
Right. And at page 22, if you go on to that, please, paragraph 67, you set out the available information sources there, from which you also obtain information yourself. And you say at Roman 1, as a list, and summarising it, you say KCTMO's online document storage space. Was that the Keystone kiosk?
I believe so, yes.
Or was it a shared drive? Do you know?
No, Keystone.
Right. And how would you access Keystone?
I was given access to it as a icon on my desktop.
Right. And was that always the case? Did you get the access to Keystone as soon as you started doing FRAs?
No.
When did you first get access to Keystone?
Well, I've just looked here. It would have been about 2014.
Yes.
It took a while for the IT to set up to.
Right. Before you got access to Keystone. How would you access information?
Two ways. I could go into the hub and ask the maintenance department and say, I'm going to these buildings in the next 2 months, please provide me with all this documentation. They would either print it off, or I would try and do it building by building on the week before I went.
Right. Where would you get the information building by building from?
Well, I'd ask Janice Ray first.
I see. And in this statement, as you say, you were given access sometime in 2014 to Keystone. In fact, might that have been a little bit later, October 2015 possibly?
It possibly could. I know it took a long time to set up.
Yes.
To get that access, and then even when I did get the access, sometimes I sometimes couldn't log on.
Right. The reason I ask you that, or suggest it to you, is because we've seen a document. Can we look at it? TMO 00859-318, please. This is an email. TMO 00859-318, email 11th of October 2015. In which Janice Ray asks John Parsons within the TMO to brief you on Keystone servicing information. So might it be, in fact, not until October 2015 that you eventually got access to Keystone?
Possibly, because it took a long time to get it accessed.
Right. And we have other documents as well. And as I think you say, before that date, you would normally physically have to retrieve them from the maintenance team at the hub. Right.
Yes.
Or get them from Janice Ray. Now, Dr. Lane, one of the experts to the inquiry, has examined the Keystone system, and she's concluded, and just for the record, this is at paragraph 11.2.56 of Chapter 7, BLARP 25033, page 220, that Keystone did not contain a maintenance and servicing record for the smoke control system or the dry fire main or emergency lighting. Do you agree with that?
Off the top of my head, I can't answer that question.
Right.
That I got information off the systems.
Right.
If it wasn't on Keystone, I then rang and asked.
I see. So on the footing that she's correct, you access that information in relation to, for example, the smoke control system by going into the hub and asking the maintenance people there, or asking Janice Ray directly.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt. If I couldn't get that information, I would then highlight it on the significant findings that I didn't have that information.
Right. Was there a consistent means by which the TMA provided records of maintenance to you, or was it provided on an ad hoc basis when you were, as and when you asked for it?
Once I had access to Keystone, I had access to most of it, but a lot of buildings didn't have systems in them anyway, so they were only talking the high-rise buildings.
Did you always ask for complete up-to-date information from Janice Ray before completing each FRA or FRA review?
Yes,
You
well, I
did.
tried to.
You tried to. Now, paragraph 67, 3 and 4 of your statement on page 22, if we can go back to that, you say that you would rely on third-party confirmations. It's at the foot of your screen. And at Roman 4, if we can just scroll up, you say contractors. You'd also rely on contractors. Just focusing on those for the moment, would your reliance on third-party confirmations and contractors be based on conversations with them? Or it was a more formal way of getting information from those third parties?
Well, contractors, so it could be verbally, but I wouldn't have access to a contractor, but it could be contractors' labels. So for lift maintenance, there's a lift record logbook kept in the lift motor room. I would always look at that, but every time I went to a building that had a lift in it.
I see. So when you refer to, in Roman 3, an example, Mance Master Doors confirmation that doors installed with 30-minute rated fire doors, that was by looking at the labels on the doors, was it, rather than speaking to somebody at Mance?
Agreed, I would not have spoken to anyone.
I see. So third-party confirmations isn't actually a confirmation by a third party in response to a request by you. It's you looking at the labels and the instructions.
Sorry.
Or
Information provided by them, certification.
right. So it's a documents exercise.
Yes.
What about contractors? Would you speak to contractors?
So, like in the case of the refurbishment of the tower, yes.
Right. And would those confirmations from contractors be recorded anywhere?
Only if I was making notes as I was going around the building.
Why would you not make notes as you went around the building?
That's what I'm saying. On my notes, that would be the only place. I wouldn't take minutes or anything.
Right.
There was no formal meetings as such.
I see. On the topic of arranging access, in your first statement at page 17, if we can please scroll back to that, you say at paragraph 51, as I've shown you, that Janice Ray would assist you with the practicalities of arranging access. For inspecting flat entrance doors, I think you said earlier that you would take it upon yourself to knock if there were signs of life within. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever ask Janice Ray to arrange access with a particular tenant or leaseholder in respect of any flat where you wanted specifically to have access?
Sometimes it could be arranged, yes.
Do you remember occasions when it happened?
Leaseholder doors was one. If I needed to have access, she would arrange it.
And if we stick with the statement and go to page 20, look at paragraph 59, you say, I did not pre-arrange access to the flats as this would be extremely time-consuming and intrusive, and in many cases not possible. My visits to the tower would happen in the day when many people were at work or otherwise engaged. I would, however, knock on some of the flat doors while visiting to see whether I could carry out some limited internal inspections of the doors.
Correct.
If you didn't pre-arrange access, how could you ensure that you could carry out a sufficient sample, a sufficiently representative sample of flat entrance doors?
I couldn't, but it was a sample. If every door was the same throughout the building, right, I would sample some doors. As I said before, if they were all different doors, I would didn't get access, I would highlight them on the risk assessment, then come back or get access at a later date through Miss Ray.
Right. So, no pre-arranged access. So you've essentially left it to chance to see who was in, and if you got lucky, then that was good, and if you didn't, you would note it on the action plan.
Agreed.
Right. Now, yes. And how would you know whether your sample on any given occasion was adequate?
I wouldn't.
No. Am I right in thinking that there was no guidance or benchmarking on what is properly a representative sample of flat entrance doors?
As far as I'm aware, no.
Right. Can we go to paragraph 72 of your second statement, please? Second statement at page 18. If we look at paragraph 72, you say, you refer to a document. Document CST 402861 was a standard letter posted to residents in 2010, the year in which I began undertaking FRAs for the KCTMO as CS Stokes. This letter refers to me knocking on doors during FRA inspections, not for the KCTMO arranging certain inspections in advance. As far as I can recall, this was the only year such a letter was distributed. At no point was I aware of any prior arrangements or appointments being made, neither would I expect them to have been made. And let's look at the letter. It's at CST 402861 as cited in your paragraph. And it says, Dear resident, fire risk assessment within the communal areas of your block. This is to advise you that CS Stokes and Associates have been limited have been appointed by the TMO to carry out a fire risk assessment in the communal areas of your block. These assessments are a legal requirement, and our appointment has been made following consultation with the Council and the London Fire Brigade's local fire safety team. Specifically, we will be inspecting the communal areas of your block and assessing all the fire safety measures, including the means of escape, fire doors, emergency lighting, etc. As part of this assessment, we will need to inspect a number of the flat entrance doors, and so we may call on you and request your permission to inspect and assess your front entrance door. This should only take a short time, and we would be grateful if you felt able to allow access for this. The consultant will carry a TMO ID badge, so please do ask for sight of this before you allow access. The consultant will be in your block in the week commencing 18th of October 2010, which is, I think, in the first week you started on the medium risk programme, as it turns out. Now, do you know if this letter was sent out to residents at all?
I'm assuming so, yes.
So how did it work? You provided this as a template to Janice Ray, and then you expected her to send it out.
If memory's correct, this was between the two of us, and then this would be distributed by the caretakers in the blocks.
I follow. Did it help you gain access to flats to inspect flat entrance doors?
I don't know, because I would have knocked on doors anyway. This is when I first started, so I had no idea what the doors were. I was learning the type of doors they had within their buildings at that time.
So this is the fourth quarter of 2010, when we know you produced an FRA on the 29th of December 2010. Do you remember when you did that? We'll come back to this later on, but do you remember when you did that you were helped in managing to obtain inspection of the flat entrance doors by this letter?
I've got no idea, because there was never any follow-up undertaken.
Do you know whether a letter similar to such as this was sent after 2010 by the TMO?
I don't think so. I think it was a kind of one-off, because I was trying to get a perspective on what standard of doors was involved in the buildings.
So you say it was a one-off?
I believe, as far as I'm aware. I never saw these letters again, or had much, not block-wise.
Right. Going back to your first witness statement, page 18, paragraph 55, Roman 2, visits. You say at that paragraph, I would then inspect the common parts. Where necessary and or possible, I would speak to those I met whilst inspecting the building, i.e. any residents, or during the refurbishment, contractors. When you met residents in the common parts, did you ask whether you could inspect their flat front door?
Yes, I would always do. Is it possible? Could I please have a look?
And when you walked around a high-rise building undertaking your assessment, what kind of proportion of front doors would you knock on in order to gain access? Would you try all of them where you could hear somebody in, or ignore some?
The former. If I could try and get access, I would. But in a lot of cases, depending on the building, how many doors in the building, if there was 5 doors and they were all exactly the same and I could get access to one.
And how would you document what you found on your tour of the building where you did manage to get access?
On the notes, I always used to write draw up a drawing of the building on my notes, and then I would put down if I got into one flat 3, door, flush, timber, self-closer, perco, overhead, strips and seals, yes, no.
Where you couldn't get access to a sample of entrance doors, a sufficiently representative sample of flat entrance doors, did you note that down?
Yes, well, I would note it down in the body of the document, because I couldn't actually say what type of self-closers they were. So I would put in significant findings, further action is needed to come back and have a look.
Did you ever raise with Janice Ray as a point of concern that you couldn't access a sample of flat front doors, or did you just leave it to the action plan?
It would go at significant findings on the action plan, but we did have meetings where things were discussed, like common, I'm not saying faults, but common items that were cropping up time and time again.
And then if we stick with paragraph 55 and look at Roman 3 and 4, Roman 3 is at the foot of page 18. You say, after my inspection, I might request additional information, although this was not strictly necessary, as where information was not available, this could always be flagged in the FRA / the appended significant findings schedule. That's the action plan.
Yes.
And then over the page 19, you say, Roman 4, I would then prepare the FRA and significant findings schedule, the latter containing the matters which needed to be addressed in traffic light designations based on priority. See further paragraph 68 below. Would you discuss your findings with Janice Ray before issuing an FRA and the significant action plan?
If it was if it was immediate action required, yes, I would do that before I left site. But otherwise, if it was just a routine door not shutting properly or something like that, no, it would go on these significant findings.
Was there any reason why, if you couldn't get access to a suitable sample of flat entrance doors on any particular visit, you didn't note that in the FRA itself, as opposed to leaving it to the significant findings and action plan document, which was separate?
It probably would be noted in the body of the significant findings, because I would be or couldn't say in the body that the doors were self-closing or.
Yes. See, I misunderstood it, but I thought that the significant findings schedule, as you call it, I think, or significant findings and action plan document, was reserved for identifying the concerns that you had and then grading them. That's right?
Yes.
Yeah. So why would you, if you couldn't complete an inspection because you couldn't get access to a suitable sample of flat entrance doors, why not raise that in the body of the report itself, so as to be able to say, I can't judge the condition of the flat entrance doors in this particular building?
I think most of the time I could always get at least access to a few or could comment on it.
Right. So does that tell us that it was only a very rare occasion when you would actually not be satisfied that you'd had sufficient access?
Yes.
Right. Going to paragraph 68 of your first statement on page 23, please. We just move forward 4 pages. You say, where there were identifiable concerns, however, these would be raised in the significant findings schedule. This identified the risk or hazard and specified actions to be taken. These were given priorities, low, medium or high, and the schedule was set up in such a way that it could act as a checklist for the KCTMO to ensure that each of the items were dealt with. When it came to carrying out a new FRA, I would use the previous significant findings schedule as a starting point to ensure that all points raised had been dealt with. See paragraph 119 for an example of how this worked in practice. Now, you say that when it came to carrying out a new FRA, I would use the previous significant findings schedule as a starting point. Was that only for new FRAs?
For when I went back to any building.
Oh, I
would
see.
use the previous one.
So it did include FRA reviews?
Yes.
So just for an example, when you went back to Grenfell Tower in the October of 2014, you used the significant findings schedule from your December 2012
Yes.
FRA, is that correct?
If they were the dates, yes.
They are the dates. Yes, I see. And when you undertook your visit, I think you said you took notes. Did you have a particular notebook, or what did you make your notes on?
Usually A4 plain paper, or if I had a drawing of the building, I would make them on those.
Right. I mean, other than the notes we've seen you made on your visit in April 2016, on the 2014 version of the Significant Action Plan, the inquiry has never seen any manuscript notes of your visits. Can you explain why that is?
Because normally after the under one I'd undertaken, I would destroy the old notes, so I only ever kept one copy back.
I see. Can we go to page 17 of your statement again, please, and look at paragraph 52, and also paragraph 53 on page 18. But 52 says, initially, if I carried out an FRA in a given year for a particular high-risk building, including the tower, it was intended that the FRA would be reviewed in-house by the KCTMO the next year, and I would then undertake a fresh FRA the year after that. And then if you continue over the page, as can be seen from Ms. Ray's email dated 12th May 2015, in 2015, the KCTMO decided that FRAs should be carried out on high-risk buildings every 3 years, with FRAs on medium and low-risk buildings to be carried out at least every 4 years. Reviews would then be carried out in-house by the KCTMO annually in those years when an FRA was not undertaken, In relation to the tower, however, the April and June 2016 FRAs were requested outside of this proposed regime due to the refurbishment. Now, just help us with the in-house FRA review. When you say reviews would be carried out in-house by the TMO annually, in those years when an FRA was not undertaken, who would undertake that in-house FRA?
The health and safety team.
Did they produce a document, building by building?
Sometimes, because I would get copies.
And who within the in-house health and safety team would carry out these in-house FRAs?
It would be Janice Ray, Adrian Bowman, and there was later stages they employed at least one or two other people.
Right. And what did these documents that you've just referred to look like? You say sometimes because I would get copies. What did you get?
It was it was a tick sheet. Like a health and safety tick sheet. I think I did forward one on. I can't remember off the top of my head without looking.
Do you know what that in-house review entailed?
I would like to think going over the previous significant findings and then walking around the building and looking to see if there was any damage or any other items within the building.
Right. Were you ever asked to advise on the appropriateness of any in-house review, as you call it? In other words, whether it was a good review or a bad review, or you just sent the tick sheets, as you call them, for information?
Tick sheets for information.
Right. And what did you understand the TMO wanted you to do with those tick sheets?
I suppose nothing really. I asked for them to see that something, an in-house one had been undertaken.
Right. It sounds as if, from what you're saying, that the in-house review was simply a monitoring exercise on the progress of closing out FRA actions. Is that right, or was it any more profound than that?
I can't comment. I don't know.
Right. At any rate, did when you say that in-house reviews were carried out, I detect from your evidence that you don't mean an FRA review of the kind you would do.
No.
I see. Now, let's look next at the TMO's fire safety strategy, please, at TMO 00830-598. Now, what I'm going to show you is a document dated November 2013, signed by Janice Ray. And if you go to page 15 in that document, you'll see her name at the bottom and the date. Page 15, there it is, November 2013. Is this a document with which you are familiar?
I've seen this document and commented on it, yeah.
Yes. Now, if we go to page 10, paragraph 14.3.3, it says this: specifically, as thorough FRAs have been undertaken in all RBKC locations, in blocks where criteria 2 to 4 above do not apply, it's our intention to carry out a shorter review exercise on a regular basis, with a more fundamental new FRA completed at less regular intervals. It is anticipated that the shorter, more regular reviews, which will tend to concentrate primarily on progress, with previous action plan and identification of any changes, will be carried out in-house by the TMO Health and Safety team. However, where completely new FRAs are required, either because of some of criteria 2 to 4 apply, or on a recurring basis, the services of a specialist fire risk assessor will be used. Now, I'm assuming you were aware of that approach.
Yes.
Yes. In January 2013, now this is before November 2013, and the production of this document, it's right, isn't it, that you were asked by Janice Ray to review a draft of the TMO's draft fire safety strategy?
Yes.
Yes. And the document is at CST 402046. Let's just have that up just to pin it into the record. this is the draft document, and it's got, as you can see from the key at the top, green your comments, yellow your deletions, and blue your questions. Is that right?
Yes, but I was asked for comments, so these would have been my comments to be taken, yes, by them.
Indeed, and we'll come back to some of those in due course. If you go, please, to paragraph 14.3.3, well, 14.3, at the bottom of page 8 and onto page 9, you can see that the fourth paragraph down on the screen, it's now 2/3 of the way down your screen, says specifically, as thorough FRAs have been undertaken, etc., etc., etc. You've seen this in its early draft form and made no deletions or comments on it apart from a stray on. So is it right, can we take it, that you had known about this proposed procedure from January 2013?
Yes.
Yes. Was this procedure that is referred to here in place as of January 2013? Do you know?
I've no idea. I just asked a comment on this.
Did you ask her about it? Did you, or rather, did you ask her, or did you assume that the process that she's referring to in that paragraph applied and was in place as of January 2013? Okay.
I can't remember, but I would assume it was in place, because otherwise how would they undertake the in-house reviews? There must have been some document in place.
Right. And now, going to your second witness statement, at paragraph 46 on page 12, on this subject, you say there that, in the second sentence, to the best of my recollection, I was not provided with copies of any reviews undertaken by the KCTMO. Did you ever ask for them?
So which one?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Paragraph 46.
Oh, sorry.
The second sentence, paragraph 46. I'll repeat what you say. To the best of my recollection, I was not provided with copies of any reviews undertaken by the KCTMO. And my question was, did you ever ask for them?
To be honest, I can't say I did or I didn't.
Now, you referred to getting tick sheets or copies of documents earlier on. If you were getting copies of tick sheets, which you explained earlier were the result of the in-house reviews done by the TMO, what are you referring to here when you say I was not provided with copies of any reviews?
I was, from my recollection, I saw tick sheets of like a health and safety document walking around the building. Whether so I can't answer the question because looking at this now, no, I don't know the answer.
Right. I'm just trying to reconcile what you said earlier with your statement. You say I was not provided with copies of any reviews undertaken, but you do say you were provided with tick sheets on FRA actions.
They had an in-house system which would tick off actions from the risk assessment, and I cannot remember what their in-house system was called.
Right, but that's the limit of the in-house review you saw, is
Yes.
that right? You didn't see any reviews which actually exercised any FRA kind of judgment?
No.
I follow. Now, if we move on to the question of minuted meetings, if we go to the consultant's brief, and that's at CST 705, page 7, paragraph 1.8. This is the consultant's brief, July 2010. You can see that there's a heading, client meetings, and it says regular meetings. We'll need it blown up, please, if we can. Thank you. Regular meetings will be held between the project manager, the H&S advisor, and the consultant to discuss possible issues, monitor progress, and review the service provided. The meetings will be held monthly and will be chaired by the TMO project manager and minuted by the TMO H&S advisor, and the consultant will be expected to attend at no additional cost. Did those monthly meetings actually take place?
Wherever the meeting was required, I attended it. Whether that was monthly, I can't remember.
Well, it says regular meetings.
Regular.
And they're to be held monthly. Did they happen monthly?
I would say no, not monthly.
Right. Did you not insist that you should have monthly meetings with the TMO as provided for here?
No, I was in regular contact with them. If they had a problem, they would contact me straight away. I was always available on the phone and emails.
When you started working for the TMO, or with the TMO, as it were, who was the TMO project manager as contemplated by this provision?
I'm going to say Janice Ray.
And who was the health and safety advisor?
Janice Ray.
I see. So she held both roles as contemplated by this clause. So
Well, I can't think of a project manager.
was there anybody else other than Janice Ray that you would meet regularly or irregularly?
No.
When you did meet regularly or irregularly, were there minutes of the meetings?
Yes.
And who took those minutes?
Janice Ray.
And did you see them after the meetings?
She would always send a copy on, yes.
Right. And who else was at these meetings?
I'm just trying to think. Whoever was there would be minuted into the meetings, but I don't think there was anyone regularly that attended the meetings with us.
Right. The reason I'm curious about this, Mr. Stokes, is that we have, as I understand it, never seen minutes of meetings like this, monthly meetings or irregular meetings held pursuant to clause 1.8 of the contract.
Well, there would have been minutes, but they would have been emailed to me, or I would pick a hard copy up from Janice next time I was in the office. But majority of the time, as far as I remember, they were emailed.
Right.
I wouldn't have printed those off.
Right. Well, let's park that. Can I then turn to a different topic, which is other work that you carried out for the TMO in the course of your contract or contracts? Can we go, please, first to your first statement, page 10? And let's look together at paragraphs 28 to 30 on pages 10 and 11. And summarising what you say there, between 2010 and 2017, during which time CS Stokes was carrying out FRAs for the KCTMO across their portfolio of properties, I was at various points requested, and then there's a list of things that you were asked to do, and you set those out over the page onto page 11. Let's just do that very quickly. Now, going back to going back to page 10, please, paragraph 28. You say, I was at various points requested to do those things there. Did you charge extra for those?
Yes.
You did. And how would you bill? Did you bill monthly or?
Monthly.
Right. And what was the rate that you billed at?
In the initial contract, if it was an FRA, it was predetermined whether it was a new one or a review. Then there was letters were a set rate, or if it was visits to a building or a survey, if you want to call it that sort of undertaking, it was a reasonable rate.
And if you go to your statement at paragraph 24, please, on page 9, just back a page, we can see that you cover this subject on in Little Roman 4 of paragraph 24. You've quoted it. And what you say there, you're quoting section 1.9, and you say, I was required to offer fire safety help, advice and support to the TMO managers, employees, and when requested, or as and when requested. That's right, is it?
Yes.
Yes. Did that include commenting on the TMO's fire safety strategy in January or February 2013, which we've seen?
I think that was done as a favour.
That was done as a favour, was it? Right. Why did you do a favour? Why not charge for that?
I cannot remember if it was charged for or not, but I would think it would be done as a favour
Right.
to look, could you look at this? But please, you would have to check my invoicing, I would not know.
Fair enough. Were you ever asked to comment on the TMO's June 2017 fire safety strategy? Shall I show it to you?
Yes, please.
TMO 00847 This, I should tell you, was still in draft at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire.
Okay, it's by my facial expression, I was trying to work out dates.
Yes, I understand that. Just looking at page 1, is that a document, just looking at it, you think you've ever seen before?
It could be. I don't think I could be confusing it with the other one. But I'm going to say probably I could have seen it.
Now, you were, I think, involved in the fire safety training of ESAs, Estate Services Assistants, weren't you?
Yes.
And you've set out in your second witness statement, page 9, paragraphs 28 to 33, no need to look at them, the details about the training that you gave, or rather that you provided to Janice, or provided with Janice Ray to the ESAs in early December 2016. Did you ever provide any other training to ESAs other than on that one occasion?
I think there was 2 occasions, wasn't there?
Right. You say 2 occasions.
I think so. One was, yes, on 2 different locations, I'm sure there was.
Other than those, were there any other occasions when you provided training
No.
to ESAs? Can I then ask you about your role in relation to the refurbishment? First statement, page 11, paragraph 30.4, Roman 4. You say there, we'll pick it up in the second line, I was not at any time contracted, retained or appointed either on behalf of Salvus or CS Stokes in relation to the tower or any other TMO property. Then Roman 4, to undertake any ongoing consultancy and or supervisory role in relation to the refurbishment. But it's right, isn't it, though, notwithstanding what you say there, that you would advise those involved in the refurbishment on discrete fire safety issues if you were asked?
By the TMO.
By the TMO. If you were asked by the TMO, you would nonetheless advise?
Yes, because that was part of my contract.
Yes. And is one example of that, I'll show it to you, your advice to Steve Blake of Ryden about fire compartmentation, which you cover in your second witness statement. Perhaps that's an unfair question without showing you your statement. Can we look at your second witness statement, please, at page 43? Look at paragraph 167. Under the heading, discussion with Simon Blake. His name is actually Stephen, but not to worry. Item 220 of progress meeting number 20 notes would appear to relate to item 3.10.2 of progress meeting number 19. That item states, SB noted that the inspector had identified areas of existing fire compartmentation which needed addressing. It was discussed and agreed that although these works were not required under the current contract, it may be beneficial to the TMO to carry out these works to improve the condition of the building. SB, that's Steve Blake, to draw up a proposal identifying scope, cost and programme implications of undertaking this additional work to be issued to CW and Artelia. CW will then review the necessity of these works with TMO fire risk assessor and instruct accordingly. I believe this relates to a question raised with me about electrical risers located on either side of the 2 lifts at each level. Because there was an unbroken concrete floor slab in place, i.e. no holes or gaps, and I was not made aware of any intended works, I advised Simon Blake that no further work was required. Did you know why you were being asked to advise Ryden on matters such as fire compartmentation during the refurbishment?
Did it not come from the minutes of the building control officer?
Well, I'm asking you, what's your recollection, what's your evidence about why you were being asked to advise Ryden on matters such as fire compartmentation?
You'd have to ask the TMO who instructed me to do it, but that's the understanding of where the location was it is part of the risk assessment because that was the floor slab within those sealed risers, and no work was needed.
I see. Is that a good example of you providing self-contained advice on particular issues to Ryden during the refurbishment?
Yes.
Were there other occasions on which you did so?
Nothing doesn't spring to mind.
Right.
No.
In what was Claire Williams the person who had generated the request for you to give this advice to Ryden, or did it come from Ryden?
It would only have come through Janice Ray, and he ever worked. She
Right.
instructed me because that was a point of contact.
Okay. And what about Claire Williams? Did you ever speak to Claire Williams?
Yes.
Did she ever give you instructions?
If she did ask anything, it always went back through Janice Ray because that's where my invoices went.
I see. Do you remember what circumstances Claire Williams would ask you to give advice in relation to matters arising in the refurbishment?
None spring to mind, but I'm sure there was some over the time.
Let's turn to the subject of fire safety management, and particularly the Salvus Fire Risk Management Report that you may remember from September 2009. Do you remember advising the TMO on fire safety management generally?
No, because that was not undertaken. It was undertaken by Salvus, and I was never there.
So it was not part of your remit?
No.
Do you agree that you would be required to assess the TMO's fire safety management, even as a fire risk assessor?
Yes, and hence the letter we talked about earlier.
And to take it shortly, you were familiar, were you, with the principle enshrined in PAS 79, which make that clear that that was part of your role?
Yes.
Yes. And just for the record, that's clause 16, Romans 1 and 2 on page 50 of CTA 703. How did you assess the TMO's fire safety management systems?
Reading the Salvus letter, asking the questions in the letter that I asked for, and practically asking people what would happen.
Did you do that frequently or just once at the start of your relationship with the TMO in 2010? Well, as CS Stokes Limited.
It would be ongoing.
Right, it would be ongoing, would it?
Well, I'd like to think they would tell me if there was anything that they'd changed in their policies or procedures.
Now, let's dig a bit further into the detail. Can we go to SAL 6013, please? This is a copy of the Fire Risk Assessment Management Report completed by Steve Wayne of Salvus on the 22nd of September 2009. And we can see that at the end of the document, which I won't go to for present purposes. Is it right that you had no role in preparing this report?
Correct.
Do you remember seeing this report before now?
I think I must have asked for this or had looked at this when I won the contract for the medium.
Right.
Because I would have asked for it, what was in place.
Who gave it to you? Did Salvus give it to you or did Janice Ray give it to you?
I'm going to say Janice Ray because I wouldn't have thought Salvus would.
No. Do you remember seeing it when you carried out your FRA for Salvus, or as part of Salvus, on Grenfell Tower on 30th of September 2009?
No.
It had been produced the week before, so it leads me to ask you whether you'd seen it.
I wouldn't.
No. What about when you started work for the TMO in autumn 2010, October 2010?
Well, I would have probably have asked for it then.
Right. And at that time, did you read it?
Yes, I'd like to thought so.
Let's look at page 13. This is the start of the action plan. And you could see the date on the top right-hand corner, 22nd September 09. That's the date of the assessment. And just looking at the scheme of the document, it's entitled Safety Management and Training, Action Plan, and the and the document is divided into columns: paragraph number, priority rating, action required to reduce risk, and then a traffic light system down the middle. And then action by name, action required by date, reassessed by, and revised risk category. You can see that the items marked in red are those that indicate that there'd been a statutory breach, can't you?
I don't know what the traffic lights mean.
Right, well, let me help you with that. If you go down to the end of the document, please, at page 19, you will see key to colour coding on the right-hand side: red, statutory breach; amber, best practice stroke guidance; green, consultant recommendation, additional life risk protection. And while we're on that page, cast your eye to the left-hand side and see also key to priority rating and the 5 levels there.
Yep.
1 is immediate action required within 24 hours. 2, short-term action required within 1 week. 3, undertake action within 1 month. 4, action within 3 months or agreed plan within 6 months. 5, review as part of business plan. Now, going back to to page 13, items in red are marked as such where there is a statutory breach. That's what's intended. All right?
Yes.
You would therefore have been aware that looking at this document, if you scroll down from 13 slowly through to 19, if you scroll down, you could see the red ones as we go. You don't have to count them up. I've already done that. If you go to the pages 15, 16, 17, 18, and then 19, I have counted and double counted again and arrived at a total of 19 red areas where the TMO was considered by Salvus to be in statutory breach. And if you look at the second column, which is the priority rating column, you can see that the majority of those items flagged red have a priority rating of 3 or 4, which meant that action needed to be taken within 1 month or within 3 months, or a plan agreed within 6 months. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Now, once you started work for the TMO as CS Stokes and Associates Limited in 2010, did you ever ask Janice Ray for confirmation as to whether the issues identified in this report had been addressed, particularly the red ones?
Looking at this, isn't my letter of September 2010 covering most of these items?
Well, we'll come to that. But is that your answer?
Yes.
So when you sat down and wrote that letter, you had this document in front of you, did you?
No. I don't think I've seen this, or if I did have seen this, I would have asked for it, whether I was ever given it.
Right. So when you referred to your 27th of September 2010 letter a moment ago, you weren't intending to convey the idea that that letter was a response or a follow-up on this document, just to be clear.
Yes.
Thank you. Is it right then that when you started working for the TMO in reality, October 2010, you didn't consider how the actions about the fire safety management of the TMO had been remedied since this report had been written the previous year?
To be honest, I can't remember seeing this report when I worked for Salvus.
Right. Is it right, therefore, that you, as part of your first job, did not look at or know about the 19 statutory breaches that should have been actioned within 6 months?
Well, no, because I would have asked why wasn't they there if I'd have known of this.
Right.
And looking at your document at the bottom, what you showed me earlier, this says Rev 8 on it as well.
It does. This is Rev 8, which all that tells you is that as of the 22nd of September 2009, when this document was produced, it had been through 8 revisions. So exhaustively peer-reviewed, yeah, as a document. My question that follows from that is, did Janice Ray explain to you that notwithstanding that Salvus had produced this report with 19 statutory breaches on it in the September of 2009, some or all of those had been cleared off by then?
No, question in my mind is, as I was writing the documents and there was a management part in Salvus, why wasn't I highlighted this to me?
Well, that's what I asked you earlier. It wasn't, was it?
Well, no.
No. and you answered this a moment ago, only a week later you produced your first fire risk assessment for Grenfell Tower, while with Salvus, and I take it that you didn't have this document in your hands.
No.
Can we go to RBK 30052534, please? This is an email from Janice Ray of the 12th of October 2010 to Gary Sodo, or Sodo, of London Fire, copied to Anne Muchmore, and she's at RBKC Housing, and forwarding something called Friday's meeting with the TMO. And I'll just show you the first two paragraphs. You don't see the email at the time, so I'm not going to proceed on the basis that you did, but it says this. 1, CS Stokes and Associates Limited, appointed to carry out the fire risk assessments on the Council's medium risk blocks, assessment programme likely to begin on site, week commencing 18th October 2010, and aim to complete in 6 months. 2, aim to use same approach as before, Carl's standard pro forma to be used, copy provided to fire safety team at the meeting, and no comments received at this time. Recommendations to be colour-coded and prioritised, residents to be advised in writing in advance, monthly progress meetings planned with consultants, etc. However, the intention is for the consultant to do as much work in advance of the programme commencing as possible to establish the extent of our fire safety planned preventative maintenance contract and associated asset registers, our inspection regimes, fire safety training programmes, policy on installation of smoke alarm, PEEPs, etc. We are hopeful that this will result in fewer recommendations being made and will allow us to focus our attention on the significant findings. Now, I want to focus on the words, however, onwards. The intention is for the consultant to do as much work in advance of the programme commencing as possible. In respect of that advance work, did you do that advance work?
This seems to be referring to most of the items in the letter that you showed me earlier.
The letter of the 27th of September 2010, is that?
Yes.
I see. Did you do advance work on those items?
Yes.
And what did you do?
To try and find out as much information as possible, to put information into the boxes and headings of the risk assessment that would cover the items.
Right. Did you produce a report?
I've no idea. I mean, I asked that letter. I can't remember what came back from it.
Right.
But whatever came back, I would have put in the risk assessment.
I see. So the idea, was it your understanding that you would do all that work as preparatory work for the first for the risk assessments, as opposed to for the purposes of a particular report?
Yes.
I follow. And was any of that work focusing on fire safety management of the TMO, rather than specific items in specific buildings?
Didn't it ask for the fire safety training of caretakers as they were and things like that?
Now, let's look at CST 403061, page 1. Again, this is your 27th of September letter. This predates the email from Janice Ray to Gary Sodo, or Sodo, and the letter says, in the second paragraph, the following items at issue are the basis of this letter: employee fire training, fire and emergency information for residents, routine in-house fire inspection, safety inspections, etc. Was any of those to do with fire safety management of within the TMO? Or were these all topics for your FRAs?
Well, employee training is the management side of it.
Yes.
So some of them would cover management, yes.
Any others?
Well, management would cover fire and emergency information for residents, which should be in their handbooks. And the policies, contractors' policies, etc.
And yes. looking at that item, was that the only time when you considered the TMO's arrangements in respect of fire safety management?
Well, we undertook some training at a later date. It was ongoing. I mean, looking at this, there's another 7 pages here that I haven't seen at the moment. But it would cover, management would cover most things, even down to the fact that, what the residents' handbooks, when a resident moved into the building, what were the instructions, what were they told, things like that.
Going back to the Salvus FRA management report from September 2009, SAL 6013, please, and go to page 5 in that document. You can see there at the bottom of page 5 and over to page 6, bottom of page 5, it says at 1.1, lack of a TMO fire safety policy statement, and you've got lack or inadequate TMO policy and arrangements, lack of inadequate recording systems, e.g. logbook and or fire safety manual. And then over the top onto page 6, 1.4, lack of ineffective managerial audit of fire safety arrangements. Those are the hazards that are identified by Salvus in that September 2009 report. And you can see what is in the existing control measures columns in each case. If we scroll back to page 5, in respect of 1.1, and I want to focus on the italics, it says, there does not appear to be an overall TMO fire safety policy statement setting out the organisation's strategic fire safety objectives, including reference to achieving full compliance with the requirements of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, wherever it applies, to premises managed and or occupied by the TMO, and which is formally endorsed by the Chief Executive on behalf of the TMO. And then on the next one, 1.2, there does not appear to be an adequate policy in supporting arrangements to explain how the TMO will meet the objectives set out in any future strategic policy statement to ensure suitable and sufficient fire safety is maintained at all times throughout the TMO's property portfolio. No specific policy and arrangements for fire risk assessment, appointing fire safety assistants, fire prevention, general fire precautions, use of dangerous substances, maintenance, training, and cooperation and coordination, all of which are required by law. And then underneath that in italics, there does not appear to be any contingency plans in place for matters that may immediately and adversely affect fire safety arrangements, such as defective fire doors, fire alarms, etc. An up-to-date business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan was not available for review at the time of the assessment. And then under 1.3, folder not available at the time of assessment, no fire safety manual as recommended in BS 9999. And then over the top of page 6, I'm summarising, no senior managerial audit of fire safety arrangements adopted by the TMO to ensure that all fire safety related policy and procedures are being carried out diligently and in accord with set standards to meet the organisation's strategic fire safety objectives. Now, I've read that to you at some length. When you started your role as the TMO's fire risk assessor in October 2010, did you know about these weaknesses in the TMO's fire safety management system?
No.
Can I ask you to look, please, at CST 404383? This is an email from Janice Ray to you on the 28th of September 2010. That's the day after your letter to her that we've been looking at, which again followed on from the meeting you had with her on the 24th of September 2010. And there's an attachment. And the attachment is Management FRA Action Plan, TMO FRA Management Report, completed 2009. That is the Salvus Fire Safety Management report that we've just been looking at in some detail, Mr. Stokes. So it looks as if you did receive this document from Janice Ray.
It does, yes.
When you received it, did you read it?
I would presume I would have read read it, but I would have liked to think that there would have been some actions signed off as well, since this is a year later. But
Indeed. She sent it to you. Do you remember what you did next?
no.
Do you remember whether you opened it, read it, were horrified, rang her up and asked her what had been done since September 2009?
An honest answer would be no, I can't remember.
And the question is why would you not have done such a thing? We find no record of you doing so.
I would have thought I would have spoken to her on the phone, but a lot of I'm guessing here, most of the information would have been acted upon, I would have thought.
Right. She sent this to you without any message at all. It contains 19 statutory breaches, as we've seen. Did this not trigger a conversation between you and Miss Ray about the extent to which the TMO had cured any of those 19 statutory breaches in the 1 year and 2 weeks since the date of that report?
I would like to think it would have done. And my letter to her asking for questions on items to clarify those points.
Well, your letter, of course, predated the day on which you received that document. After you received the report, did you ask her whether they had a fire safety policy statement, for example?
To be honest, I can't answer that question honestly because I can't remember. So I would like to think I would have done.
So would your same answer pertain to the question, did you have a policy and arrangement to set out your statutory fire safety obligations?
Yes.
What about contingency plans in place for matters that may immediately and adversely affect fire safety arrangements? As I read to you.
The answer would have been, what was the outcomes for all these for the year before? But I cannot remember.
Right. And did you ask her whether there were senior managerial audit arrangements now in place, which had not been in place the year before, in respect of fire safety arrangements?
I can't remember.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm puzzled by why you can't remember. I know it's a long time ago, but would it not have been extremely shocking to read, to receive this document without any explanation?
That's why I'm puzzling, because if I'd had this, I would have tried to have done something about it. And I would like to think I would have had a document that said this has been actioned, but I don't seem to have had that document, or I can't remember.
And we see no record of you going back to her and asking her that very question. Can you explain that?
No, I can't.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Mr. Stokes, we'll have a short break now. We'll come back, resume at 3:30, please.
Okay.
And please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're away from the room. All right? Thank you very much. All right, 3:30 then, please. Thank you. Yes, would you ask Mr. Stokes to come back in, please? Okay. All right, Mr. Stokes,
Okay, thank you.
keep going. Yes, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Stokes, I'd like now to turn to the FRAs themselves. And first, a little bit of an overview, if I can. Once you were appointed by the TMO, can you confirm that you carried out five fire risk assessments for Grenfell Tower? And I'll just go through the dates. 29th December 2010.
Yes.
20th of November 2012, 17th of October 2014, yes?
Yes.
Yes. 26th of April 2016 and 20th of June 2016.
That sounds correct. Then.
Yes. Were you the only fire risk assessor for the TMO between 2010 and 2017, do you think?
As far as I know.
Right. Have you ever heard of a gentleman called Leon Taylor?
No.
Right. Were you aware that he completed a fire risk assessment of Grenfell Tower based on an inspection he conducted in June 2014 on behalf of Repairs Direct? Did you know that?
No. Well, I'll be honest, I was given a supplementary document last night that had a name on it,
Right.
but I have not read it all, but I did know that there was something else that was in there.
Right. Well, let's see if and this may not be the document, but can we look at PSC 701, please? There is a fire risk assessment for Grenfell Tower done by Leon Taylor, as you can see in the second box, on the 14th of June 2014, with the suggested review date of the following, a year later. Is this a document you've seen before?
No, it was a summary I was given late last night.
Oh, right. A summary of what?
From Mr. Todd. On a supplementary.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see.
A supplementary report from Mr. Todd.
Yes. Sorry, sir. Yes.
So you don't know what this is?
No.
Now, in respect of your fire risk assessments, can you explain why you were asked to carry out a fire risk assessment of Grenfell Tower on the 29th of December 2010, when you yourself had completed one only a year before, on the 30th of September 2009?
No.
And given that the TMO's approach at the time, as we've seen, was to carry out an FRA every 2 years.
I just undertook instructions as I was given.
I see. You didn't question the instructions. You didn't ask Janice Ray, why am I doing a fire risk assessment of Grenfell Tower? I did one only last year.
No.
Right. Was there any discussion of that at all, or you just carried out your instructions?
I'd just taken over. I mean, it was just one of those things that I was trying to please, I suppose, but I didn't question.
Can I ask you to look, please, at your first witness statement at page 18, paragraph 54, at the bottom of page of the page, paragraph 54, and first witness statement, page 18, paragraph 54. You say there that the 2014 FRA was the first FRA undertaken whilst the refurbishment was underway, and the April 2016 FRA and June 2016 FRA were undertaken in short succession around the time the refurbishment was completed. Were you able to carry out a suitable and sufficient FRA even though the refurbishment had started?
Yes.
You were. And in respect of that fire risk assessment, let's look at CST 3030043. This is the letter you wrote on the 17th of September 2014 to Janice Ray, subject Grenfell Tower, Grenfell Road. Dear Janice, thank you for asking me to visit the above premises where refurbishment work is being undertaken. I'm due to undertake a review of the building's fire risk assessment, FRA, next Tuesday, the 23rd September, so any answers to the following points will assist me with the FRA review. If the answers can be provided by Monday of next week, the 22nd, I will incorporate them within the reviewed FRA. Otherwise, the questions will be asked as part of the significant findings of the FRA. I have numbered the questions, and they're set out on the bottom of that page and then the next page. And I think there are 10 pages in all of questions that you asked her. Would you undertake this kind of site visit before conducting each FRA, or only this one?
This is site-specific to this one.
Why was that?
Because the refurbishment was being undertaken, and I wouldn't ask for building regs application forms, etc., or the London Fire Brigade comments on them on a building that no work was being undertaken on.
Did you visit the building because she asked you to, or because you felt it was necessary to do so, given that there was a refurbishment in progress?
Isn't this a scheduled review? This would be 14. Wouldn't this be the 2-year period to a schedule?
Well, a little bit before. The last FRA for Grenfell Tower you signed off on the 29th of November. 20th of November 2012.
And this is
September 2014, so it's not quite 2 years. But you shrug.
It's a reasonable time period.
So this was a scheduled review, and is this right? It was because there was refurbishment in place that you felt it necessary to visit?
No, this is a scheduled review, isn't it?
Do you visit?
Yeah, I'm due to undertake a review of the building.
We're slightly at cross purposes. Would you undertake a site visit whenever you were doing a scheduled review?
If I was to review, I would always have to go to the building to undertake a review of the FRA.
Regardless of whether there was a refurbishment in place? Yes,
if it was on the programme to be reviewed, the time periods given, I would always have to visit the premises.
Right. When you completed the risk assessments we've looked at, the 5 for Grenfell Tower, how long would it normally take you to complete such a report?
The report or the actual walk around the building?
Well, start to finish, take the 2012 FRA for Grenfell Tower as an example. Just as an example, how long would it take you, start to finish?
To walk around the building, say 4 hours, and then probably the same to write it up.
Right. So each FRA would take a total of 8 hours?
Yes.
Right.
Give or take.
And what about drafting the significant action plan?
Yeah, that includes the writing up.
I see. So 8 hours in total. Now, is it right that you charged £410 plus VAT for every new FRA and £320 plus VAT for an FRA review?
If that's what it says on your document, yes. It changed each year. I think I was allowed to put it up by a small amount.
Right. That's what you say in your witness statements, yes. At paragraph 22, your first witness statement. So I'm taking it that that's correct.
Yes.
Right. It's right, isn't it, that whether you were undertaking a new FRA or an FRA review, there'd be no difference in your information gathering or assessment process. Is that right?
Correct.
So if there was no difference, well, let me ask you this way. Would it take you less time to do an FRA review than it would to do a new FRA?
Yes.
Right. And why is that?
Well, because I'd know the layout of the building. So, for instance, if I'd never been to the building before, I'd have to work out, say, where a lift motor room was. How do I get the ladders for it? How do I get keys? Where if I've already been there before, I would know that an FB2 key opened that locker, the ladders are there. If I went up, I'd know with the layout inside. So it'd be a lot easier and simplified to do it that way.
Yes, I see. So the saving of time in doing an FRA review would be on the physical visit to the building rather than in the creation of the report, or is that not correct?
That's correct. And also actually access to the building. Where is the building?
Right. Now, I want to look at some general questions arising on the FRAs next, if I may. Across all of your fire risk assessments, we've seen a lot of the same text from year to year. Is it right that when you drafted an FRA, you would cut and paste text from the previous versions?
Correct, as long as nothing had changed.
Right. And is it right that you would only update or change sections where you have obtained new information?
Correct.
Otherwise, the same text from the previous FRA would appear, would it?
If nothing had changed, I mean, the structure of the building, for instance, Grenfell Tower is still a concrete building, concrete floors, concrete walls, unless,
Right.
you know,
This
someone's
this cutting and pasting, Mr. Todd is critical of that. He says that's poor or inappropriate practice. Would you agree with that?
if nothing has changed, you could change some words in it, but it's still the same.
Right. Would you also copy and paste material from other FRAs for other buildings?
Try not to.
You try not to.
But if it was a similar, I'm just trying to think of something in one building that would be similar. If there was a mobile telephone mast on the roof, and I'd already written that up in one building, I would take it over to the new one and alter it so it was site specific to that building, rather than redrafting a whole 2, 3, 4 paragraphs.
Yes. Let's just see if we can illustrate this with an example.
Yes.
If we go, please, to your 26th of April 2016 FRA for Grenfell Tower, that's at CST 403161 at page 1.
April 16, okay.
There's page 1.
Yes.
And if you look down page 1 by scrolling up a little bit, please, to see the next part of it, lower down your screen, you see it says areas not covered, all the private residential apartments and balconies.
Yes.
But Grenfell Tower didn't have any balconies, did it?
Not on the apartments, no.
So where did those words come from?
The balconies on there would be, there was a balcony at the lower level,
Right.
where the name, if I call it the caretaker's office, it went out the back, and the staircase came down, and there was an open balcony at the back.
Let's stick with this FRA. Can we go to page 19? Look at section 11, pest control.
Yes.
Question, is there suitable control of any pest infestations? Tick. Yes. And then halfway down the comments or observations, where pigeon netting has been erected to cover flat balconies from a visual inspection from the ground. There appear to be no areas where this pigeon netting was damaged, and it appeared to be well fitted.
Yes.
At the time of this assessment, there was no access to each flat balcony, as these are private areas. You see that?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, there's no pigeon netting, was there?
The pigeon netting was over. There was some pigeon netting, and that is a copy and paste, and that's I can see where I've gone wrong there.
Yes. I mean, to be fair to you, Mr. Todd picked that up in his first report.
Okay.
I mean, that's a slam dunk, isn't it? Cut and paste from another building.
Yes.
Yes.
I should have altered that to balconies at the back and the roof level.
And in fact, the October 2014 FRA and your June 2016 FRA contained exactly the same text, didn't it?
Yes, and the balconies at the lower level had gone by now. It was being ripped out. It was a house, a dwelling.
But you accept that?
Oh, yes.
That was, yeah. Can you explain how come, when you were doing your FRAs for Grenfell Tower, on 3 occasions you introduced the pigeon netting text, if I can call it that?
Honest answer would be pest control, nothing's changed, and just left it in and not read it.
Not read it?
Yes.
Yeah. And that means, and includes not reading it when signing it off?
Yes.
Now, sticking with your, well, let's go to your 2014 FRA, if we can, please. CST 403157, page 3. At the top of your FRA, there, you've listed If you go to page 3, thank you, yes, you've listed as the responsible person, the Chief Executive of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Why did you name the Chief Executive of RBKC as the responsible person?
They are the landlords of the building, and that's the person or the name, title of the person who's responsible person of RBKC.
Right.
Who are the owners of the building.
So that was who you thought the responsible person was, did you? Kensington, rather than the TMO?
My memory's correct. I asked this question, the responsible person at the time, was it the TMO as the management company or the council put that one in as being told that's the person. The next one down, sorry, I do apologise, the next one down, building owners, council of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea.
Yes. Did nobody tell you that in fact the responsible person under the RRO was the TMO? Did Janice Ray never come back to you and say,
No.
You've got the responsible person wrong here?
No. And the London Fire Brigade never came back, and they've audited these as well.
Did you ever tell the Chief Executive of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea that you regarded that RBKC was the responsible person for the buildings within the TMO stock?
No.
Why is that?
For me, the owners of the building are the responsible person. The management agents are responsible as well under the fire safety order, but the ultimate responsible person would be the owner of the building.
Right. Did you ever discuss that question with Janice Ray?
Well, I'm going to say yes, I must have done, because it's in the document, and she's reviewed the document numerous times, and in some cases actually reviewed them because of corrections that she wanted to make in the documents.
Did you ever supply your fire risk assessments directly to RBKC?
No.
Why is that, given that they were the responsible person?
Because my contract was with the TMO and my point of contact was Janice Ray.
Did you ever have any direct contact with RBKC staff once you'd become appointed as fire risk assessor for the TMO stock?
No.
Right. So what assumptions did you make about whether and in what circumstances RBKC would excuse me, get to see this document?
My thought process, if they needed capital money to undertake any work, they would have to go to the landlords and owners of the building, who would be the responsible person to undertake major refurbishments of that building.
Right. What did you understand to be the relationship between RBKC and the TMO, so far at least as your role is concerned?
The TMO were the managing agents of RBKC who managed the housing stock on the building owner's behalf.
Now, if we can stick with this fire risk assessment, this is the 2014 fire risk assessment, and look please at page 2, go back a page. You can see there that towards the top of your screen there's a title, Legal Statement. And I'll read it to you. It says, Legal Statement, underlined. This risk assessment has been undertaken as a requirement of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, the enforcing authority, i.e. the police, in quotation marks, for the FSO, are the Fire and Rescue Authority for the area in which the premises are situated, Article 25 of the FSO. It is the local fire and rescue service who therefore have the power to undertake an audit of the fire risk assessment to determine if it is suitable and sufficient or not. Other agencies can ask if you have completed a fire risk assessment, but it is not for them to view, enforce, or make judgment on. You do not have to give a copy of your risk assessment to anybody, not even the fire authority. If you do give them a copy, this could be used against you at a later date. And then you cite from Article 9 of the FSO. And then underneath the citation, of subsections 6 and 7, you say this towards the bottom of your screen. Say legally, you have to record any significant findings from the risk assessment if you fall into the categories of 6A to C above and have this available to be inspected. Now, you're not a trained lawyer, are you?
No.
No. And nor were you authorised to give legal advice by any UK legal regulatory body, were you?
Correct.
No. Can we go to Colin Todd's report, please, at CTA 6011? CTA 6011, page 76, paragraph 8.15. And this is underneath the title in the middle of your screen, Legal Statement Within the Fire Risk Assessment. 8.15. I find the incorporation, he says, I find the incorporation of the above statement very surprising. Not only was it unnecessary and likely to be regarded as confrontational by inspecting officers of LFB when they studied the FRAs at the time of any audits, the statement is, in my opinion, incorrect as a matter of law. Any audit of premises by a fire and rescue authority under the fire safety order actually begins with the study of the FRA. As he is a previous inspecting officer of a fire and rescue service, I find it difficult to believe that this is not known to Mr. Stokes. Mr. Stokes, on reflection, would you agree with Mr. Todd's conclusion there?
All I was stating there was, as it says in the Green Book, which is that you must undertake an FRA, and the document says you must then have the significant findings available to be inspected.
Well, would you agree that any audit of premises by a fire and rescue authority under the RRO begins with a study of the FRA?
If they ask for it.
Mr. Millett, I think we have the witnesses' evidence on this, but I think we may all need to remember that Mr. Todd isn't a lawyer either.
No, that's certainly an obvious point we can make when he comes, or ask him about when he comes to give evidence. Let me ask you this: were you aware of the LGA? Well, let me show you the LGA guide. What I'm wanting to put to you is something slightly different. HOM 30455964, page 42, part D, paragraph 31.2. First sentence. The Fire and Rescue Authority will examine the fire risk assessment at the time of any audit of the building. Were you aware of that principle?
Sorry, which one were we looking at, please?
Paragraph 31.2.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
The Fire and Rescue Authority will examine the fire risk assessment at the time of any audit of the building. Were you aware of that principle?
Yes, but the fire safety order says that you only have to record the significant findings.
As a matter of guidance, did you not think that it was important for the enforcing authority to be able to view the FRA?
Totally, and if they asked for it, they would have been given it. I had assumed that both documents were provided, but the fire safety order only requires that you record the significant findings and have them available for inspection.
You see, you said in your statement, in your legal statement, you do not have to give a copy of your risk assessment to anybody, not even the fire authority.
Correct.
Now, you don't say that you do have to give them a copy of your risk assessment if they ask for it, do you?
Please, can I see it again? Because
Yes,
what you've just read out is correct. You do not have to give them a copy, but you have to have it available for them to inspect at any time reasonable that they wish to do so.
Well, we can debate the terms, but I'm happy to show it to you again. CST 403157.
Just wondering if this is going to help very much, Mr. Millett, because Mr. Stokes has told us what he understands the position to be. Mr. Todd has said what he understands the position to be, but these are matters of law, really, aren't they?
I'm not asking the witness about legal matters. What I'm asking about is why the statement appears there in circumstances where the guidance says the opposite.
Well, the guidance is any guidance, isn't it?
Yes. Well, let me ask you this: the legal statement that you've set out in your FRAs, and we've seen them across all your FRAs, were not included in the FRA of Grenfell Tower that you did when you were at Salvus on the 30th of September 2009. That's right, isn't it?
Correct.
nor in the fire risk assessment template in any version of PAS 79.
Sorry, not in any PAS 79 version?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
No. And why did you think it necessary and appropriate to include such a statement in your FRAs that you did for the TMO?
Because that is what the fire safety order actually asks for, that you only have to record the significant findings and they have to be available to be inspected.
Did Janice Ray or anybody else from the TMO ask you to put a statement
No.
Like this into your
No.
FRAs? What made you do so?
Because that's truthfully what I understand, and my understanding of the fire safety order is.
Can we turn to the minutes of an RBKC TMO Operations Committee meeting on the 25th of November 2010 at RBK 3052563? Now, you were not there. That's the first observation to make. As you can, but you can see who was there. No, that's the wrong. That's page 1. What we need is page 6. In fact, page 1 is in fact a later meeting at which these minutes were approved, which is why that was there. Page 6 is the minutes of the 25th of November 2010 meeting. You weren't there. But we can see who was. Janice Ray was, and she provided an update to the committee on page 8, if we can look at that, please. And you can see from that page that fire risk assessments item 7 is set out, and she reports, if you look at the last paragraph, as follows: JW confirmed that, as expected to date, significantly fewer recommendations were being made in relation to the medium risk blocks as compared with the high risk blocks. JW advised that the TMO and RBKC were still liaising closely with the London Fire Brigade, LFB, and we still had recently met to introduce our new consultant to them. However, it was clear that our new consultant was willing to challenge the Fire Brigade on our behalf if he considered the requirements to be excessive and beyond what they could reasonably ask of us. In particular, we had managed to get an agreement from the LFB that as of now, when they visit audit our premises and do not have any concerns that would warrant a deficiency notice, etc., they will write to us advising us that at that point in time the building was, quotes, broadly compliant, close quotes. JW added that she was keen to include this information in the annual health and safety report, as this would start to give a more balanced picture of fire safety activity across the stock. Is it right that you were, quotes, willing to challenge the Fire Brigade on the TMO's behalf?
If I was asked to, yes. And I
You were
believed,
asked to?
and I believed it was correct.
Right. Did you ever have any discussions with Janice Ray about taking a more robust, perhaps more contentious approach to the LFB?
No. Not in that context, no.
Are you able to explain from your understanding why Janice Ray thought that it was clear that you were willing to challenge the Fire Brigade if you considered their requirements to be excessive?
Maybe, I'm guessing, please ask Ms. Ray, but maybe because I'm an ex-fire officer and I've been through the same training, I would actually understand where they were coming from and actually explain back in their language.
That's a fair answer, but it leads to this. Do you recall any particular topic arising in respect of which you were advising a challenge to the LFB because you thought their requirements were excessive or unreasonable?
One that does spring to mind is leaseholder doors.
When was that? When did that topic arise? Given that this is November 2010.
Virtually around that time.
I see. Now, going back to the 2014 FRA, if I can, please, CST 403157, page 3. We've looked at this page a number of times, but let's go back to it. I want now to look at the third heading from the top. Person consulted during the assessment. And for this one, it was Paul Stedman of the TMO and the residents of the building. You see that?
Yes.
What did the residents of the building mean? Who had you consulted?
Well, if I could see anyone within the building, or I could ask to look inside, look at their flat, I would ask any questions. Do you have any problems?
I see. So this was an informal conversation with anybody you came across on your rounds?
As long as they lived in the building, yes.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. How would you know? How would you know that they lived in the building?
I would ask, do you live in the building?
Right, and you take them at their word.
Well, if they then said yes, I would say, well, is it possible I could see your flat door? Is it possible I could just look inside? Do you have any problems with your fire alarm system within?
In other FRAs, we see that you consulted Claire Williams. That is what's said in the April and June 2016 FRAs. You don't need to go to them. Can you explain why Claire Williams was consulted for those FRAs?
That was which one dates, please?
April and June 2016.
Because that was the time of the refurbishment, and she was the project manager. So I think I asked her first if she had any updates on any minutes, building reg, consultation, anything like that.
And these consultations, were they formal meetings, or were they just people you could ask questions of as and when you had questions?
A bit of the latter.
Right.
Mostly if it was done by an email, do you have any questions for me? Have you got these answers? But they would, Janice Ray would always be copied in, because that was the point of contact.
Well, I was going to ask you, would you not consult Janice Ray, given that she was the health and safety manager and also the person responsible for implementing the actions that you had identified in your significant findings schedules?
Correct. But
So why not make her the consultation person?
could be, but then she would get the information from someone else, but I could contact her as well as. And this is 2016, did you say?
Yeah, well, this one is 2000. I'm asking you about 2016, yes, but that's Claire Williams. You've explained that.
But in 2016, I had access to Keystone, so some of the information I could get direct from their system.
Looking at what's on the screen, this is 2014. Yes. Paul Stedman is identified as the person consulted during the assessment. He was an ESA, wasn't he?
Yeah, caretaker, yes.
A caretaker, if you like, or estate services assistant.
Yes, sorry.
A rather grander expression. And he was the estate services assistant for Grenfell Tower, wasn't he?
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
Well, they had the wider estate, so they had ESAs for the wider estate. And
indeed, you recall that he was the consultation individual identified in your November 2012 FRA, this FRA, 17th of October 2014, and indeed the one in 2010 as well.
Yes.
Yes, so those three. And is that because he was, as you put it, the caretaker?
Yes.
I see. And he was who carried out health and safety inspections on Grenfell Tower from time to time?
I believe so, yes. Right. That was
and carried out various checks on the fire safety system, such as the AOV, the lift, etc., yes?
Whatever their caretaker's checklist had.
Whatever the caretaker's checklist had. And would you look at the caretaker checklist and make sure that it was complete for your purposes?
I had looked at them. That was one of the items that I made certain that part of the occupier's checklist, who was doing it, when were they undertaking it.
Yes. And looking a little bit more deeply into that, let's start in the right place chronologically. Can we please go to the 29th December 2010 FRA, CST 403165. This is the significant finding schedule to your December 2010 FRA. If we go please to page 4, in that you can see that it says at item 20, next to the priority high, identified risk or hazard, the caretaker of the building has undertake daily checks as per the caretaker's checklist, and this document is then kept as a record of these procedures having been undertaken. And then actions to be taken. Can it be confirmed that the caretaker is carrying out the daily checks as per the caretaker's checklist? Now, if you look down at item 23B on the next page, please, second row, again, high, red, identified risk or hazard. Some of the portable firefighting extinguishers in the building have condemned written on them in large black writing. This seems to indicate that monthly occupier inspections are not being carried out, as the inspections would have spotted the writing and the last service date was 2009, and then actions to be taken. It should be confirmed with the caretakers if they have carrying out monthly occupiers inspections of the portable firefighting extinguishers as per the caretaker's checklist. If the monthly checks are not being undertaken, they should be started immediately. And also note, while we're on that page, Mr. Stokes, the foot of the page, 23E, same point again, this time relating to emergency lighting system, final exit doors. Would you agree that similar actions were repeated in your 2012 and 2014 FRAs and significant action schedules?
Without looking at them, I can't comment on that, but if you say they're there.
Right.
You mean, did I undertake the same process, or?
Well, yes. I mean, do you remember? We can look at the documents. That as a matter of record, I can tell you that the 20th of November 2012 had something similar in it in relation to testing and maintenance. And in the significant findings schedule, you asked again for confirmation about the monthly inspections of the portable firefighting extinguishers using exactly the same wording, warts and all. The reference to that is CST 403083, page 5. We can look at it if you want.
Yeah.
And similarly, at item 23 of that action plan at page 6, you asked. Well, let's look at that one. Actually, that's quite a useful one because the wording's slightly different. It's CST 403083, page 6. This is the 2012 significant action schedule now. Item 23. You can see 23E, same risk, action to be taken, slightly different terms. Can it be confirmed that the caretakers are undertaking the monthly occupier test of the installed systems and firefighting equipment fittings with the completed sheets kept as record? It is an offence under the fire safety order not to undertake these inspections. Similar points, not identical wording, in the 2014 FRA and significant findings schedule. We can look at those again if you want to, but they are at CST 403157, page 30, and CST 403177, page 9. We can look at those if you want, but similar point made again, different wording. My question is, if you consulted Paul Stedman, who was the estate services assistant or caretaker, on each occasion, why didn't you know whether the caretaker's checks were being completed?
Looking at this, the caretaker's checks, there's no records, is what I'm saying here. Are they undertaking them? Are they recording them? What he could say to me, to my face, is yes, I'm doing them, but I'm challenging here that there is no records and they do not appear to be undertaken.
Right. Did you have a conversation at any stage, taking this example, did you have a conversation with Paul Stedman and ask him why the fire extinguishers have not already been replaced?
No.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, he would only be undertaking the checks. It would be up to the repairs and maintenance department or the maintenance department per se to undertake and supervise external contractors coming in. The ESA is just the ears and eyes of them and doing no more than I am, reporting what's there or not there. I'm asking, has he reported them? It's not something I would challenge in front of him and say, have you done your job properly? Because I'm just a contractor.
Looking at the second sentence in that box, it's just an example. Can it be confirmed that the caretakers are undertaking the monthly occupier tests of the installed systems and firefighting equipment fittings? Again, why could you not ask him that question and interrogate that issue yourself?
I'm there as a risk assessor, not to interrogate someone on the premises to whether they're actually undertaking their job as per their contract of work.
Why did you have to ask for confirmation in the significant findings schedule rather than just getting the statement from the horse's mouth?
It's not something I would want to challenge someone who I may not have been doing the job he should have been doing.
Right. Or is this an example of cutting and pasting from other versions of other documents?
As you can see, the wording is different, so it's not cutting and pasting.
Were you concerned that every time you completed an FRA of Grenfell Tower, you didn't have any information about whether the monthly checks and tests of the installed fire safety systems and emergency lighting were taking place? It seems to be a repeated theme.
And I would have asked for the checklist.
You would have asked for the checklist. Did there come a point when the repeated theme felt like you were asking for the same thing over and over?
Yes.
And was that not something which would have led you to escalate the matter?
Which would have been a agenda item on one of the meetings that would have happened.
Did you ever obtain or seek to obtain any assurances from Janice Ray or anybody you consulted with on that?
Yes.
And what was the upshot?
I can't remember exactly, but I would have asked the question. I would have taken this back with me to the next, whichever one I undertook previously, go back. Is the same thing happening again? Yes. And then highlight it back to the TMO. It's for the TMO to undertake the actions. It's just for me to go around the next time, which could be potentially 2 years later.
Can we look next at the topic of evacuation and the strategy? In your fire risk assessments, you include a section on page 5 entitled Evacuation Strategy for this building. Let's look at the 29th of December 2010 FRA for Grenfell Tower for that. That's at CST 403181, page 5, please. And I'll read this to you, although the language will become familiar to those following this as we go through it. The title, Evacuation Strategy for this building, and note the words for this building. And this is divided into two parts, residential and employees. And under the residential part at the top of your screen, it says, for the residents of this building, there is a defend in place or stay put evacuation strategy. This means the residents remain within their own dwelling during a fire incident unless the fire is in that dwelling or it is otherwise affected, in which case they should immediately evacuate the dwelling and call the fire and rescue service. The fire service or Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, RBKC, or Tenant Management Organisation, TMO, employees will arrange for a general evacuation of the building at any time if this is appropriate, or the resident can leave at any time if they so wish. TMO has provided information to all residents via letters and briefing sheets of what to do in the event of an emergency, and articles on fire safety advice and emergency procedures are included in the residents' magazine called Link. Also, articles are provided reminding tenants that they must not store items in communal areas nor cause obstructions to the means of escape. These articles are produced in the 7 major languages which have been selected as being most likely to meet the needs of the residents. The landlord relies upon the tenants to respond to any emergency in accord with agreed emergency plans and does not facilitate any fire drills or other emergency evacuation exercises. What was the purpose of this section in general?
What is the evacuation strategy for the residents of the building?
Well, was the purpose of this text here to set out your consideration of the fire procedures that were in place for evacuation in the event of a fire?
Yes.
Yes. And is it right that you used this section of your FRAs to set out the arrangements for providing fire safety information to TMO residents?
Partly, yes.
Yes. Now, the requirement to consider fire safety procedures, do you agree, is set out in PAS 79 at clause 16.3? And I don't expect you to remember the precise provision. Let's look at it and then confirm what I've just asked you. CTA 703, page 54. 16.3. If we can have that expanded, please. In the course of fire risk assessment, the following matters should be considered. Any shortcomings in these matters should be identified in the documented fire risk assessment and should be addressed in the action plan, see clause 19. A, the fire procedures, including procedures for people with special responsibilities in the event of fire. B, the arrangements for summoning the fire and rescue service in the event of fire. C, the nomination of people to respond to fire using firefighting equipment if appropriate to do so. D, where appropriate, the nomination of people to assist with evacuation. E, arrangements for liaison with the fire and rescue service. And then skip down to I, fire drills, and then skip further down to M, appropriate records, including normally a fire safety manual. Would you agree with the first sentence of that section or clause, that the purpose of identifying and considering the fire safety procedures in place is so that you can identify any shortcomings, and if any are found, identify them in your FRA and action plan?
Yes.
Now, in the commentary to clause 16, and we find this at page 51, Roman 8, left-hand column, under fire procedures, if we can scroll up a little bit, you can see more of it. In the course of the fire risk assessment, there is need to ensure that there are formal, documented procedures for people to follow in the event of fire, and that the procedures in question are adequate. Adequate procedures will normally address, and there's a list of things. Do you agree that your role as a fire risk assessor was to assess the adequacy of the TMO's fire safety procedures for people to follow in the event of a fire in their building?
Yes.
Yes. Now, in your FRA, if we go back to page 5 of CST 403181, this is the December 2010 FRA, we've seen it says, and I've pointed this out already, the section is entitled Evacuation Strategy for this building.
Yes.
This building. Was it therefore your intention that this section would set out the specific evacuation strategy for Grenfell Tower for which you were conducting your fire risk assessment?
In two parts, one for the residential areas, one for the commercial retail areas or offices.
Yes, and without going to each FRA that you did for Grenfell Tower thereafter, would you agree with me that each FRA included the same paragraph as we've just looked at in this 2010 FRA, so far as the residential part of the building is concerned?
Yes, I'm hesitating is because the last one did not have any other areas apart from residential in it. So without looking at it, I don't know whether there is the bottom part would be in that one.
Right.
Because the gym and the nursery weren't in operation then, they were still shell buildings.
Right. Just focusing on the part I read out aloud to you, the top part of the box, do you remember where you got that information from initially?
The defend in place, stay put.
The text. The information making up the text.
It is predominantly from what stay put policy is as per the guidance per built work of flats.
Let me be clearer. You've set out the evacuation strategy for Grenfell Tower in this December 2010 FRA, and I've read you the text for the residential part of the building. What was the source of the information comprised in that text?
The history of where did it come from?
Well, where did you get it from?
Well, that's the stay put strategy, and it would have come from the initial FRA and the 2013 fire strategy that you showed me earlier.
Well, the 2013 strategy only came into being a year later. This is 3 years later. This is the 2010 FRA.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So this is the 2010 one. So this is what stay put is. Stay put is from documentation. So
yes, just look. Let me be more specific. Where did you get the specific information about the TMO providing information to residents via letters, briefing sheets?
Talking to Janice Ray and the letter we talked about earlier on. So as I started this process, this was part of the information.
Right. Now, you say the letter we talked about earlier on, was that the letter of the 27th of September,
Yes.
2010?
Yes.
Which was a few months before you signed off on this document?
Yes.
And that, as we know, followed your meeting with Janice Ray on the 24th of September 2010, yes?
Yes.
Let's just go to that then, to pin this down. CST 403061, please, page 3. And what I'd like to do is put that up at the same time as this text, if we can. Keep what we have on the screen at the moment and put up page 3 of CST 403061. That is not what I'm after. That is what I'm after. Thank you. Now, what we have on the right-hand side is the letter, part of the 27th of September 2010 letter. And if we look at and compare the texts, you can see, just casting your eye from right to left and back again. And it says, on the right-hand side, in residential accommodation buildings, there's a defend-in-place evacuation strategy for the residents. This means the residents remain within their own dwelling during a fire incident unless the fire is in their dwelling or it is otherwise affected, in which case they immediately evacuate the flat and call the fire and rescue service. The fire service or TMA employees can or will arrange for a general evacuation of the building at any time if this is appropriate, or resident can leave at any time if they so wish. This information is provided to the residents by TMO in a number of different formats, newsletters, the Link magazine, or at residents' meetings, etc. So it looks very much as if the source of what's on the left-hand side came from what's on the right-hand side. Yes. Is that right? But what's on the right-hand side was intended to refer to all buildings in the TMO stock for which you were to do FRAs. That's yes. Right, isn't it? Whereas what's on the left-hand side was specific to Grenfell Tower, yes?
Well, the same management or evacuation policy is going to be the same for virtually all their buildings.
Right.
The only difference is going to be, is there a fire alarm fitted in certain buildings, right, where it would be a simultaneous evacuation policy rather than a stay put.
And if we scroll up to page 2, in the letter, you see under the heading Fire and Emergency Information for Residents, in the middle of the paragraph, you see it says, as part of TMO's ongoing policy to keep residents informed on all emergency and safety issues, articles and information is regularly published about fire safety advice and emergency procedures in the Link magazine. Also, residents receive via letters and briefing sheets what to do in the event of an emergency, and reminding them that they must not store items in communal areas nor cause obstructions to the means of escape routes, etc. Again, that generic information is the same information as you've included in the second half of the Grenfell Tower December 2010 FRA in the lower part of the box on the left.
Yes.
So is it right, in reality, that in fact you obtained the information that you included in your Grenfell Tower December 2010 FRA at the meeting on the 24th of September 2010, and as reflected in your letter in response to that on the 27th of September 2010?
Yes.
And that information was not specific to Grenfell Tower, it was generic?
Generic for their buildings that were applicable to that. So in other words, they didn't have a fire alarm system fitted.
Did you ever go about, when you did your FRA for Grenfell Tower in December 2010, did you ever go about asking yourself whether there was anything specific about Grenfell Tower which would lead you to write something different when you were identifying and describing the evacuation strategy for Grenfell Tower?
No.
So although it's not a cut and paste, it's a copy across really from the generic to the specific. Is that fair?
It's going to be virtually the same. The buildings are constructed the same way. The management strategy and policy is virtually the same. It's general needs block of flats.
If we look at page 5 of the fire risk assessment, CST 403181, page 5. In the last sentence, you can see in the box there, it says, the landlord relies upon the tenants to respond to any emergency in accord with the agreed emergency plans and does not facilitate any fire drills or other emergency evacuation exercises. Did Janice Ray tell you that at the 24th of September 2010 meeting? 2010 meeting.
That they don't do any undertake any fire drills?
Yes.
No. What?
Sorry.
No, she didn't.
Where did you get that information from?
Because there was no one in the building to undertake a fire drill. It would be standard policy and procedure for a residential general needs block of flats.
So what you said there is, again, generic, is it?
Yes.
What were the agreed emergency plans referred to there?
So which line? Where am I looking, please? Left or
Yes,
right?
of course. Left-hand side of the screen, bottom, last sentence in the first chunk.
The landlord
The
replies.
landlord relies upon tenants to respond to any emergency in accord with agreed emergency plans. What were the agreed emergency plans for Grenfell Tower?
Stay put policy, which is unless the fire is immediately affecting you or your flat, you would stay within your dwelling. Otherwise, you would leave the building.
I see. So that's not an agreed evacuation plan. It's a stay put plan, is it?
Are they the same?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not for me to answer. I think probably more your line of work. Are they the same?
Stay put is an evacuation plan, the same as simultaneous evacuation is an evacuation plan. It is how the building's designed, set up, compartmented, and it is the policy or the strategy of that building.
Did you ever check to see whether the information about general evacuation was ever provided to residents by way of the TMO information to residents, such as newsletters, Link magazine, briefing sheets of what to do in the event of emergency, etc.?
Yes, so I've looked in the handbook. There was sections in the handbook. There was items in the Link magazine because I think at one point Janice Ray actually ran one by me to say, this is what London-wide, I can't remember the umbrella organisation of councils were going to put out and things like that. So yes, I do know that the information was given out.
And did you check to see if it was provided in the 7 languages that you detailed in your FRA?
And the bottom, so I'm trying to visualise it, in the bottom of the Link magazine, it actually gives you the 7 languages and it says anything in this, sorry, I can't remember exact words, but it says something like, if you cannot want it in any of these languages, please
Yes.
ask.
You are right. It does do that. But the invitation is in English, isn't it?
Isn't all the information in the languages as well, in the boxes on the document?
Well, we can look at that in due course. Did you ever ask her about whether that information ever included advice for vulnerable residents about evacuation planning or how to apply for a PEEP?
Yes, I think that was discussed at points.
But we'll come back to that tomorrow. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is, Mr. Minnitt. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Stokes, I think it's time we closed for the day.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to have to ask you to come back tomorrow to give further evidence, I'm afraid, but I think you were expecting that. So all it remains for me to say is we'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow, and please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it over the break.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you,
you
sir.
very much. Right, to go with the usher then, please. Thank you. 10 o'clock tomorrow then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.